In every school, there's a weirdo. And I don't mean those kids who just dress weird or have uncommon interests. I'm friends with those kinds of people, and they're cool. The kind of person I'm talking about is in another realm entirely. Those maladjusted freaks with hard, empty eyes who don't get along with anybody, who just sit motionless day in and day out. The breed of blossoming psychopaths that gives you chills you can't explain. These days, from what I can gather from my little brother's current high school experience, those kids are a well-known threat. But just 10 years ago, when I was a freshman in high school, there hadn't been quite as many school massacres, and we just had no idea what kind of vicious animals we were dealing with. My little brother says it's an unspoken rule to not mess with the quiet kid. They leave them be, as in, don't poke the bear. Unfortunately, my generation didn't have quite the same experience. We would make fun of those kids a lot, and not just behind their back, but to their faces too. We mimicked their weird looks and strange mannerisms and made them the laughingstock of the whole class. And in the end, somebody paid the price for it. And to make matters worse, that person surely deserved it the least. I remember my first half of my freshman year rather fondly. Things were innocent back then. I enjoyed my classes and teachers as much as could be expected, and I was slowly becoming part of a new friend group. The one exception to all these warm memories was a kid I'll just call Phil. We were in the same math class for 7th period. Aside from him, that was my favorite class. It was easy math at the end of the day with one of the school's best teachers, a young pretty woman who went above and beyond to engage with students on our level, even having us get on computers from time to time. Everyone in the class was friendly with her, since she wasn't a huge stickler for the rules, but instead would go the way of being nice to keep us on task. Well, everyone except Phil. Phil wasn't friendly with anybody, and none of us were friendly to him. He spent most days in total silence, staring off into space, probably knowing that we'd tear into him no matter what he said. But one day, the nice teacher tried to get him to pay attention and participate by calling on him at random several times.
Phil, could you tell the class the formula for a linear relationship?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Miss, I don't think Phil is very good with relationships. Even as I'm graduating from college, my biggest regret in life is contributing to the mockery that tormented this kid on a daily basis. Not because I feel bad for him, but because I feel guilty for what he became because of it.
Pipe down, everybody. There's no sense in being rude. I'm sure Phil knows the answer. It's probably just hard to think when people are making fun of you.
You're right, miss. I'm sorry.
All right, Phil. I know you're a smart kid, so you should know this. What's the shape of a quadratic?
I think Phil thought he was going to be off the hook after the first one, based on his reaction to the second question. He seemed to make no effort to speak an answer. Rather, it looked more like he was exerting every possible ounce of effort to contain himself from screaming and throwing some kind of tantrum.
Phil, would you please stay after class? I know you're smart enough to know these things, but I also know you've been having a lot of trouble paying attention. I'd like to review some things one-on-one.
For the rest of the class, Phil wouldn't take his eyes off the teacher. Every once in a while, I glanced over to see if he was still staring, and every time, Phil got a little scarier. I could see veins bulging out from his head. He held his jaw so clenched that the muscles flexed visibly under his face. His eyes were bloodshot from so much unblinking staring, and his whole body tremored ever so slightly. When the bell finally rang, signifying the end of the school day, I was very much relieved to get out of that room with him, despite the fact that my own day wasn't yet over. Not to mention that I'd gotten a detention earlier in the day for talking too much in another less lenient class. I wasn't in a rush to get there, however. I was the last person to get up and walk out of the classroom, leaving the teacher alone with Phil. Right as I heard the door click shut behind me, a chill ran down my spine, but I had no idea why at the time. I put the feeling behind me and walked very lazily to the other side of the school to serve my detention. An hour or so later, I was finished up and ready to go home. I walked out of the building toward the rear of the campus, but since I missed the school bus for detention, I had to go through the bus loop and out the gate to find a stop for the city bus. I remember it was a really nice sunny day, so I was taking my time, soaking in the rays of the outdoors after being stuck inside all day. That's when I noticed something really strange happening way on the other side of the parking lot. I saw Phil rolling what looked like a trash can over the curb and down into a ditch that led into a patch of woods. He looked like he was really struggling with it, but he mustered whatever scrawny strength he had. Right after he kicked the can down the slope into the trees, he wiped his forehead and looked all around, like he was worried about being watched. Of course, I stopped in my tracks to watch whatever this was unfold, and Phil looked right at me. He was several hundred feet away, but that made no difference. I could see the expression on his face clearly. Another sharper chill ran through my whole body. That look, it was the look of a killer, and it was staring into my soul. I ran out the parking lot without looking back and prayed that he wouldn't find me while I was waiting for the bus. Thankfully, I didn't see any more of him that day, but very unfortunately, I wasn't able to maintain my ignorance about his actions for long. That nice teacher didn't show up the next day, but really, she never left the school, unless you count rolling down a ditch in a trash can as leaving. Phil followed her into the bathroom and slashed her with a box cutter, among other things that make my stomach turn. It was all over the national news, and now I'm forced to live with the guilt of how I contributed to it for the rest of my life.
I see graphic testimony describing the moment Colleen Ritzer's body was found buried beneath a pile of leaves and debris. We also heard from a former student who was one of the last to see the young math teacher alive.
When she was in the recycling barrel, Chisholm is seen on surveillance wheeling from the school bathroom to the woods.
시원해. 아직 머리도 안 말렸는데.
My college career got off to a bad start. I'd gotten so caught up in getting enrolled into classes that I totally procrastinated on finding housing. I looked at my calendar and saw that there was only a week left until classes began and I had nowhere to stay. For 2 days straight, I did nothing but look for a rental, but to no avail. Everything everywhere was full. I passed out after being up for nearly 48 hours, totally depressed. However, when I woke up the next morning, I checked my email to what seemed like good news. I got an offer to stay in a room from someone I didn't even remember reaching out to. Unfortunately, the listing had terrible reviews. Lots of people saying things like, "Got the heck out of there 48 hours after my first payment, don't ask why," or 48 thumbs down, a nightmare. I was disappointed, but I didn't really have much of a choice. I called them to confirm the move-in. They answered quickly, but didn't talk for several seconds. Hello, is this Soo-bin Kim, the landlord?
사람들이 모두 이걸 보고 있으니 널 뚫어내야겠다고 생각해.
Hello? Are you there?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm here. Are you Thomas? You wanted the room? Yeah, just, come over and move in tomorrow. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just pay me cash.
Tomorrow? Really? Wow, thank you. See you then. I only heard what I wanted to hear. I hadn't even seen the place yet. I was just that desperate to find housing. The next day, I packed all my stuff into my car and made the drive. I met Soo-bin Kim inside the house. She was really good looking, in a heavily made up fashion trend follower sort of way. She showed me my room in the bathroom and everything else I need. Then she said,
It's just you and me in here for now. Nobody else wanted a well-priced room, I guess.
I didn't say anything about it, but I thought it was pretty strange that nobody wanted to live here. I mean, I knew the reviews were bad, but the place itself was pretty nice. That's when my suspicions fell on the landlord, and what might be wrong with her. But the only thing I noticed was she never seemed to pay much attention to me. But that's kind of a good trait for a roommate. By nightfall, I didn't care anymore. As I finished brushing my teeth before bed, I saw a pale light coming from down the hall, spilling out from Soo-bin's room. Absent-mindedly, I walked down the hall to see what she was up to. Her door was open and she was sitting on her bed, watching a video on her laptop where some woman was speaking Korean. It was past 9, but she had a full face of makeup and was brushing her hair like she was about to go out. I approached the side of her bed and leaned over to see the video.
그래서 오늘 튜토리얼에서는 메이크업 루틴을 신속하게 보여줄게요.
Isn't it a bit late to be getting ready? I mean, it's only Wednesday.
It's morning in Korea. The video just dropped.
Soo-bin moved the mouse so the title of the video would come up. All the characters were alien to me. The only thing I recognized was the number 48. Then, right at the 48-second mark of the video, it glitched. It was like a strobe effect, how quickly the video buffered, flipping between the same 5 or 6 frames of her brushing her hair. I don't know why, but it gave me chills. It played some kind of trick on my eyes. I kept thinking the poor girl was about to slash her own throat with the comb, but then it would go back through her hair for a split second, only to threaten her neck once more in the next frame. Is there something wrong with the Wi-Fi?
No, she's still talking. And look, the video bar is still moving.
It was so strange. It was just some corrupted video file, but it was captivating. We watched it for almost a full minute, until at 1:48, it finally stopped. Subin went back to brushing her hair, returning to her habit of acting as though I didn't exist. I no longer felt welcome in that room. I left and went to bed with that glitch flashing behind my eyelids as I went to sleep. I woke up to the sound of something breaking. There was no going back to sleep. Some kind of animalistic growling penetrated the walls of my room. I shot up out of bed and went to open my door. I saw that there were no lights on in the house, but something flickered from down the hall. I instantly knew it was that glitch playing on a screen somewhere on loop.
난 죽을 거야. 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 난 죽을 거야.
I looked down the hall to Supin's open bedroom door. She was standing there crookedly, holding desperately onto the frame of the door for balance. She was silhouetted by the pale flickering of the broken makeup tutorial. Her hair was a mess, but through it I could see the unnaturally wide whites of her eyes as she locked her gaze onto me, laughing like a psycho. I then heard the sound of water hitting the floor. No, it wasn't water. It was urine. Subin lost control of her bladder. She slowly crumpled, landing on all fours with her stomach pointed toward the ceiling and her back arched so severely that I thought it would snap. And in that demonic stance, she charged at me. I jumped back and threw my door shut. She slammed into it and began striking it with her body, all the while making this awful sound that was some mix of enraged growling and agonized screaming. I had no idea what to do. I grabbed my phone and my car keys and opened my window to jump out onto the grass below. I sprained my ankle, but with all the adrenaline in my system, it didn't slow me down. I crashed on a friend's couch. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't go back there. I tried to tell my friend what had happened, but he didn't believe a word of it. I called Subin a dozen times, but she never answered the phone. My friend tried to convince me that it was all in my head, a product of all the stress I'd put myself through. He offered to let me stay with him for a couple days, so I took him up on it. For the next 48 hours, I tried my best to relax and figure out what had actually happened. Then, at midnight, my phone rang. It was Subin. All I could hear over the phone was sobbing and screaming in Korean.
나는 48에 묻어 있다. 나는 48에 묻어 있다. 나는 48에 묻어 있다. 나는 48에 묻어 있다.
She wouldn't respond to me, like she hadn't even realized she called me at all. I woke my friend up and had him drive me back to the house. I had to show him that I wasn't crazy, that this had all really happened. But when we got inside the house, it was worse than I could have imagined. Subin was on the floor of the living room, drenched in blood that had spilled from a gaping gash in her neck. The knife was still in her hand. Ever since then, whenever I close my eyes, I either see Subin or that woman from the makeup video. Apparently she died around the same time, about 48 hours after posting that glitched video. But I think it was more than glitched. It had to be cursed or something. I don't know the significance of the number 48 in Korean culture, but seeing it gives me chills.
아 시원해. 아직 머리도 안 말렸는데 진짜 리얼로 보여주려고 정말 평소에 쓰는 그 나이트케어
time to meet our first 3 eligible bachelors for game number 1, and here they are. Good luck, gentlemen. Well, let's see. Bachelor number 1 is a successful photographer who got his start when his father found him in the dark room at the age of 13, fully developed. Between takes, he might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala. Rod, welcome. Time to meet our young lady for game number 1, and here she is. Here is a young lady with a wealth of experience. She once earned a living massaging feet. Now she's here to educate our 3 bachelors in the art of amour. Welcome, if you will, sensational Cheryl Bradshaw. Hello, Cheryl.
Depending on your age, you may or may not remember The Dating Game. It was a show that primarily aired in the 70s, but had a few additional runs that saw it revived for a short period in the 80s and 90s. The rules of the game were simple. 3 anonymous, eligible bachelors would sit behind a wall, and a woman would ask them silly, sometimes risque questions. At the end, she'd pick one of them to go on an all-expenses-paid date with. Simple, good fun. In one episode that aired back in 1978, a charismatic, handsome man appeared as one of the contestants, Rodney Alcala. He answered all the questions in a cheeky, tongue-in-cheek manner, and the female player, Cheryl Bradshaw, went on to pick him as her date. Little did she, or indeed the nation, know just what kind of guy Rodney Alcala was. A volatile psychopath. By the time he appeared on the show, he'd already taken the lives of at least 5 people, one of which was the goddaughter of Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. After filming, he'd go on to take the lives of many more. You see, Rodney Alcala had a secret pastime. He liked nothing more than travelling around the good old US of A, forcefully having his way with women, and then ending them. His preferred method? Strangulation. In 1979, Robin Samso, who was just 12 at the time, disappeared somewhere between Huntington Beach and her ballet class. Her was found 12 days later in the Los Angeles foothills. A sketch of a man who was seen approaching Robin on the beach was drawn up, and Alcala's parole officer recognized who it was immediately. A storage locker in Seattle that belonged to Alcala was searched. Inside, investigators found Robin's earrings. Alcala's reign of terror finally came to an end when he was apprehended for Robin's demise. In court, Rodney Alcala acted as his own attorney, like many self-assured psychopaths do, as they have a tendency to overestimate their abilities and intelligence. He even interrogated himself in front of the jury for 5 hours, asking himself questions in a deeper-than-normal voice, and addressing himself as Mr. Alcala. Well, his weird strategy failed spectacularly. He was sentenced to the electric chair. In the end, it came to light that Alcala had taken the lives of at least 8 people, though the true number could be as high as 130. Why such a high upper limit? Because a discovery was made by the investigators. For years, Alcala had been going around telling people that he was a photographer, and that's how he was able to lure so many of his victims to secluded places. He used the promise of a professional photo shoot. A portfolio of over 1,000 pictures that Alcala had taken was found. Inside were the pictures of hundreds of different people, many of them without clothes. At least 6 families have come forward saying they recognize loved ones in the pictures who disappeared years ago and were never found. It's strange watching this dating game clip nowadays. Alcala comes across as incredibly normal on camera, likable even, and most people would agree that he was the most charming and charismatic of the 3 contestants, at least in the traditional sense. You would never guess what he had done in the past, and what he would go on to do after filming. Just goes to show that you should never judge a book by its cover. True evil can appear in all sorts of disguises. Thankfully, Cheryl Bradshaw, the woman in the episode who picked Alcala as her date, didn't end up going out with him after all. After filming, she said that he had a creepy vibe about him. Her intuition may have well saved her. If she had gone on a date with him, who knows what may have happened.
Having them say hello to you and see how they sound. Number one, would you say hello to Cheryl, please?
We're going to have a great time together, Cheryl.
Okay, and here we go.
Bachelor number one,
Yes.
what's your best time?
The best time is at night, nighttime,
Why do you say that?
because that's the only time there is.
The only time? What's wrong with morning, afternoon?
Well, they're okay, but nighttime's when it really gets good. Then you're really ready.
What are you called and what do you look like?
I'm called the banana, and I look really good.
Can you be a little more descriptive?
Peel me.
Welcome back to the dating game, and Cheryl, we have reached the moment of truth, as we call it. You've heard from the bachelors, you got some great dramatic presentations, some good answers, but now I'm going to ask you a question. Will that date be bachelor number one, bachelor number two, or bachelor number three? Who gets the dates?
Well, I like bananas, so I'll take one.
Number one, bachelor number one, all right. Well, this is your date, and I want to tell you something about him, Cheryl. He's a skydiver, so he's got a lot of nerve. He's into motorcycling. He's also a fine photographer. Say hello to Rodney Alcala. Rodney, come on and say hello. Congratulations, Rod. You did it with the one answer.